I stared at the whiskey in my brother-in-law's glass, watching as he laughed with his friends. The man who was supposedly dying of kidney cancer. The man my entire family had emotionally blackmailed me into giving my kidney to tomorrow. I'd spent weeks drowning in guilt, grief, and the weight of being my sister's last hope. I'd let them dissect my independence, my career, even allowed them to take out a life insurance policy on me, just in case. All for family, all for love. But standing there in that dim bar, watching the amber liquid swirl in Mike's glass, something crystallized inside me. This wasn't love. This was theft. Of my organ, my future, my choice. My sister and parents had orchestrated an elaborate lie to harvest a piece of me, betting I was too dutiful to question them. They were wrong. What they didn't understand about the daughter they'd always dismissed was simple. The woman who built her life from nothing wouldn't let anyone carve her up for parts. Not even family. Especially not family. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The champagne bubbles tickled my nose as I raised my glass to the small crowd gathered in my Portland design studio. The hotel renovation contract I'd been chasing for months was finally mine. At 32, I had everything I'd worked for. My own interior design business, a renovated craftsman home in a trendy neighborhood, and the freedom I'd always craved growing up in small-town Michigan. To Emma Reynolds, design genius. My assistant. Taylor clinked her glass against mine, her smile wide and genuine. I told you they'd pick you over those corporate firms. I was about to respond when my phone vibrated against the table. Normally, I'd ignore it during a celebration, but the name on the screen made my stomach twist. Jenna. My sister never called unless something was wrong. I need to take this, I mumbled, stepping away from the noise. Jenna? What's going on? The sound of sobbing came through the line. It's Mike, she choked out between gasps. He has cancer, kidney cancer. It's bad, really bad. My knees weakened as I sank onto my office chair. Mike and I had never been close. He'd always seemed to resent my relationship with Jenna. But cancer? How bad? I managed to ask. The doctors say... Her voice broke. They say without treatment, he has maybe 6 months. With treatment, a year. Unless what? Unless he gets a transplant. The words hung in the air for a moment before she continued. Emma, we need you to come. Home, please. 5 days later, I pulled into the driveway of my parents' colonial-style house in Lakeside, Michigan, population 8,624. The same house where I'd grown up feeling like an unwelcome guest in my own family. 5 years had passed since my last visit. Grandmother's funeral, where my mother had criticized my black dress as attention-seeking, and my father had asked when I was going to stop playing with interior decorating and get a real job. Mom opened the door before I could knock, her face a mask of composure. Emma, she said, her voice neutral as she gave me a brief, stiff hug. You look thin. Are you eating? Before I could answer, my father appeared. You made good time, he said, checking his watch instead of meeting my eyes. Jenna and Mike will be here for dinner. You can put your bags in your old room. My old room was now clearly a storage space, with boxes piled high and a twin bed shoved against the wall. My design awards and art school diploma, which had once hung proudly on the walls, were nowhere to be seen. I set down my suitcase and took a deep breath. I was here for Mike, not to reopen old wounds. Dinner was tense. Mike looked pale and thin, picking at his food while Jenna hovered over him, cutting his meat like he was a child. My sister had always been the golden child, head cheerleader, prom queen, nursing school valedictorian, mother of 2 perfect children. Today, she looked haggard, her usually immaculate blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "So," I said, trying to break the uncomfortable silence, "tell me about the diagnosis. When did you find out?" Mike and Jenna exchanged a quick glance. "About 2 months ago," Mike answered, his eyes fixed on his plate. "It started with back pain. By the time they found it, the cancer had already spread to both kidneys." "Both kidneys?" I frowned. "That seems unusual for kidney cancer." "That's what makes it so aggressive," my mother interjected. "Dr. Richards says it's a rare form." "Who's Dr. Richards?" "Mike's oncologist," Jenna said quickly. "He's brilliant. You'll meet him tomorrow. He wants to talk to you about possibilities." The way she said possibilities made my skin prickle with unease. The next day, I met Dr. Richards at what Jenna called his private practice office near the hospital. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emma, so glad you could join us," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I've heard so much about you." For the next hour, Dr. Richards bombarded me with medical terminology about Mike's condition, showing me scans and lab reports that meant nothing to me. When I asked about treatment alternatives or clinical trials, he became defensive. "We've explored all options," he said dismissively. "A transplant is the only viable solution at this point, and as a family member, you're the ideal donor candidate. But for kidney cancer? I thought transplants were for kidney failure, not cancer." His smile tightened. "This is a unique case. The cancer hasn't metastasized beyond the kidneys yet, which gives us a window of opportunity. Remove both affected kidneys, provide a healthy donor kidney, follow with targeted chemotherapy. It's his best chance." Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. On the way out, I noticed a framed diploma on the wall. "Richard Thompson, MD, Dermatology." I blinked, confused, and looked again. Dermatology, not oncology. That evening, I helped my mother clean up after dinner while Jenna took Mike home early because he was feeling fatigued. "Mom, Dr. Richards, is he really an oncologist?" I asked casually. She nearly dropped the plate. She was drying. "Of course he is. Why would you ask that?" "Just curious." His office seemed more like a dermatology practice. "He's a specialist, Emma. Not everything is a conspiracy." She turned away, but not before I saw the flush creeping up her neck. The same tell she'd had when lying about eating the last piece of cake when I was a kid. Later that week, while looking for an extra blanket in my mother's hallway closet, I spotted a dusty photo album behind some old board games. Curious, I pulled it out. Inside were pictures from the last 5 years. Family Christmases, summer barbecues, my niece and nephew's birthday parties. Events I'd never been invited to. There were even photos of my parents, Jenna, Mike, and the kids receiving some sort of Family of the Year award from the local Rotary Club. My chest tightened as I flipped through page after page of family memories I'd been excluded from. "What are you doing?" I jumped at my mother's sharp voice. She snatched the album from my hands. "I was looking for a blanket," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "Why didn't you ever invite me to any of those events?" "You were busy with your career," she said, sliding the album back behind the games. "You made it clear that Portland was more important than family." The next day, I offered to drive Mike to what Jenna called his treatment session. He seemed reluctant, but eventually agreed when Jenna insisted she needed to stay home with their sick daughter. The hospital was a 30-minute drive, mostly in uncomfortable silence. When we arrived, Mike directed me to park near a side entrance I hadn't noticed before. "It's closer to the oncology suite," he explained, avoiding my eyes. Inside, the nurse at the desk looked confused when Mike gave his name. "Thompson? I don't have you on the schedule today." "It was a last-minute addition," Mike said smoothly. "Dr. Richards arranged it. You can call him." The nurse frowned. but led us to an examination room that looked dusty and unused. "Wait here," she said, giving me an odd look before leaving. For 2 hours, we sat in that room. No doctors came. No nurses took vitals or administered treatments. Mike scrolled through his phone while I thumbed through ancient magazines. Finally, he announced, "That's it for today, we can go now." "But you didn't receive any treatment," I said, bewildered. "It was a monitoring session. Sometimes they just check blood levels without actual treatment." He walked quickly toward the exit, leaving me to hurry after him. The following week became increasingly bizarre. I agreed to preliminary testing to see if I was a compatible donor. Instead of going to the hospital, a nurse came to my parents' house with equipment that still had price stickers from what looked like a costume shop. She took my blood in the guest bathroom, the tubes unmarked with any hospital logo. That night, I dreamed of being 10 years old again. I'd fallen from a tree at a family picnic and broken my arm. While Jenna received ice cream to feel better about Emma's accident, I'd been told to stop crying and seeking attention. My arm throbbed for hours before my father finally drove me to the emergency room, complaining about the inconvenience the entire way. I woke up sweating, my heart racing. Something was very wrong here. The next morning, I accidentally opened mail addressed to my parents, an insurance statement showing they'd recently taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy on me, with Jenna listed as the beneficiary. My hands shook as I reread the document. "What is this?" I demanded when my father came into the kitchen. He snatched the paper from my hands. "It's standard procedure for organ donors, in case of complications." Without asking me? Without even telling me? "Don't be dramatic, Emma," my mother said, entering the room. "We were going to discuss it with you. It's just a precaution." On Sunday, we all attended church, something I hadn't done since leaving home. The pastor, who happened to be Mike's uncle, delivered a sermon about sacrificing for family while staring directly at me. "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends," he quoted, his eyes boring into mine. After the service, congregation members I barely remembered surrounded me with stories of heroic organ donors and how blessed I was to have this opportunity to serve. My head was spinning by the time we got home. I escaped to my room and called Taylor, desperate for a voice from my real life. "Emma, the hotel project is falling apart," she said, concern evident in her voice. "The client keeps asking for you specifically. They're threatening to pull the contract." "I need to come back," I said, making a sudden decision. "This whole situation feels wrong?" "What do you mean?" "I can't explain it right now, but I'm booking a flight for tomorrow." When I went downstairs to tell my family I needed to return to Portland for a few days, all hell broke loose. Jenna collapsed on the sofa, crying that I was abandoning her. My mother accused me of caring more about fancy hotel lobbies than family. My father blocked the door, his face red with anger. "If you leave now, don't bother coming back," he threatened. Mike stood silently in the corner, watching the drama with an odd expression. Was that satisfaction in his eyes? That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen, thinking about everything that had happened since I'd arrived. The strange doctor's office, the unused examination room, the unmarked blood samples, the life insurance policy. None of it made sense for a legitimate medical situation. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and began researching kidney cancer and transplantation. What I found made my blood run cold. After hours of research, I felt sick to my stomach. Kidney. Transplants during active cancer treatment were extremely rare due to immunosuppression issues. Cancer patients needed their immune systems at full strength to fight the disease, but transplant recipients required medication to suppress the immune system to prevent rejection. The two protocols contradicted each other. I closed my laptop as the sun began to rise. I couldn't leave, not yet, not until I knew what was really happening. At breakfast, I announced I'd decided to stay and pursue donor testing. the transformation in my family was immediate and disturbing. My mother embraced me warmly for the first time in years. My father actually smiled. Jenna wept with gratitude, while Mike looked relieved. Before I'd finished my coffee, my mother was on the phone, calling everyone she knew. Yes, Emma's being tested as a donor for Mike. Isn't she wonderful? A true family hero. Within hours, my social media was flooded with messages from people I barely remembered, calling me saint-like and an angel on earth. The attention made me uncomfortable, especially since I suspected something sinister was happening. A week later, the compatibility results arrived in a sealed envelope. The hospital letterhead looked slightly off. The logo was pixelated and the font didn't match their website. I called the hospital's main line and asked for the transplant coordinator. "I'm checking on test results for Emma Reynolds," I said, using my most professional voice. "Reynolds?" the woman repeated. "I don't have any record of a patient or donor by that name in our system." My suspicions grew when I ran into Noah Walker at the local coffee shop. We'd been high school sweethearts before I left for college. Now, he was a pharmaceutical sales rep who visited hospitals throughout the region. "Emma Reynolds," he said, his blue eyes warming as he recognized me. "Heard you were back in town. How's Mike doing?" "You know about Mike?" Noah nodded. "I see him sometimes when I'm at county, in the nephrology department. Always thought it was weird he never mentioned having cancer, just kidney problems." "Nephrology, not oncology?" I asked, my pulse quickening. Noah furrowed his brow. "Yeah, Wait, does he have cancer too? That's awful." "That's what I've been told," I said carefully. "How long have you known about his kidney problems?" Noah shifted uncomfortably. "A couple of years, I guess. Listen, I should get going. Good to see you, Emma." That evening, my Aunt Meredith stopped by unexpectedly. She'd always been a bit of an outsider in the family, too. My mother's younger sister who'd moved to Chicago to pursue a career instead of settling down in Lakeside. "Emma, you look wonderful," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm so sorry about Mike. Kidney problems run in his family, you know. His father died waiting for a transplant, and his brother got one 5 years ago." "I didn't know that," I said, surprised. "No one mentioned any genetic kidney issues." Meredith looked confused. "It's not exactly a secret. The whole Thompson family has polycystic kidney disease. Mike's been managing it for years." The next day, Jenna mentioned she was heading to a support group for spouses of cancer patients. Something in her voice made me suspicious. After she left, I followed her at a distance in my rental car. Instead of driving to the hospital or community center, she parked outside a law office. Through the large front window, I could see her sitting with a man in a suit, reviewing documents. I edged closer and felt my heart drop when I saw my name on the papers they were discussing. That night, I stayed up researching again. Everything I read about kidney transplants and cancer contradicted what I'd been told. Kidney removal was a common treatment for kidney cancer, but receiving a transplant while actively fighting cancer was almost unheard of. The next morning, I tried to talk to Jenna about my concerns. "I've been reading about kidney cancer and transplantation," I began carefully. "Some of the information Dr. Richards gave me doesn't align with standard medical practices." Jenna's face crumpled immediately, tears flowing down her cheeks. "You're backing out, aren't you? You're going to let Mike die." My parents rushed into the room at the sound of her cries. "What have you done?" my mother demanded, putting her arms around Jenna. "I'm just asking questions," I defended myself, trying to understand the medical situation better. "The situation is that your brother-in-law is dying," my father said coldly. "And you're looking for excuses to abandon him. If you don't do this, Emma, you're no daughter of mine." I was shocked by his vehemence. "You'd disown me for asking medical questions?" "I'd disown you for being selfish," he replied. "Like you've always been." The pressure intensified the following day when I discovered the local newspaper had run a front-page story about me. Local hero returns to save brother-in-law. The article included childhood photos of Jenna and me, portraying us as inseparable sisters, though in reality, she'd barely acknowledged my existence in high school once she became popular. My phone rang constantly with calls from former teachers, neighbors, even my high school principal, all praising my heroism and adding to the mounting pressure. Things got stranger still when my parents threw a celebration of life party for Mike. Dozens of people crowded into our house, bringing gifts and envelopes of money to help with recovery expenses. I watched in disbelief as Mike, supposedly dying of kidney cancer, devoured barbecue ribs and drank from a cup that smelled suspiciously like whiskey and Coke. "Should you be drinking alcohol with your condition?" I asked quietly when I caught him alone. He nearly choked on his drink. "It's just a sip," he said, quickly switching to water. "Dr. Richards says small indulgences are fine." While using Jenna's bathroom later that evening, I noticed several prescription bottles in the medicine cabinet. Curious, I examined them. Lisinopril, furosemide, Apoetin alpha. I didn't recognize the medications, but they were all prescribed to Mike Thompson. I quickly took photos with my phone, nearly dropping it when I heard Jenna's footsteps approaching. With surgery scheduled in just 3 days, I felt like I was running out of time. I locked myself in my room and researched Mike's medications online. According to medical websites, they were all commonly prescribed for chronic kidney disease, not cancer. Desperate for professional insight, I joined a medical forum and connected with a nephrology nurse who confirmed my suspicions. "These medications manage symptoms of kidney failure," she wrote. "They have nothing to do with cancer treatment. If someone told you these are for kidney cancer, they're either misinformed or lying to you." The next morning, I drove to County Hospital and asked for the transplant center. The coordinator, a tired-looking woman named Barbara, seemed confused by my questions. "I need to complete paperwork for my kidney donation to Mike Thompson," I explained. She typed the name into her computer. "I'm sorry, we don't have anyone by that name scheduled for a transplant. Are you sure it's at this hospital?" "Dr. Richards is his oncologist," I added, watching her face carefully. "Dr. Richards?" She frowned. "We don't have an oncologist by that name on staff. There's a dermatologist named Thompson who used to have privileges here, but he was suspended 2 years ago for ethical violations." My heart raced as pieces started falling into place. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep, then slipped out with the spare key to Dr. Richards' office that Jenna had carelessly left in her purse. The small medical building was dark and silent as I let myself in. The waiting room looked legitimate enough, but when I examined the credentials hanging on the wall more carefully, my suspicions were confirmed. Richard Thompson, MD, board certified in dermatology. Nothing about oncology. Another framed document showed his hospital. Privileges had been revoked 2 years earlier. In his office, I found a locked filing cabinet. After trying several keys from the desk drawer, I managed to open it. Inside was a folder with my name on it. It contained falsified test results showing I was a perfect donor match for Mike, along with consent forms ready for my signature. Even more disturbing was a draft letter dated 3 months in the future, expressing deepest regrets that Mike's cancer had been misdiagnosed after the transplant surgery. The letter explained that he actually had chronic kidney disease, not cancer. But the good news was that my donated kidney would still save his life. They had planned the entire deception from start to finish. As I was replacing the files, I heard voices outside. I quickly turned off my flashlight and hid behind the desk. Through a crack in the door, I saw my parents and Jenna entering the office. "She's getting suspicious," my mother said, her voice tense. "That business with the medications today. She's been researching online. We need to move up the surgery." "Date?" my father replied. "Before she can ruin everything." "Richard says we can't rush it without raising red flags," Jenna argued. "But once it's done, even if she finds out the truth, it won't matter." She can't take the kidney back. And the insurance money? My mother asked. We split it 3 ways. Like we agreed, Jenna said. It's enough to clear Mike's medical debts, save Mom and Dad's retirement fund, and still have plenty left over. I felt physically ill. They were talking about my kidney, and potentially my life, as if it were a commodity to be traded, as if I were nothing more than a solution to their financial problems. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal while secretly gathering evidence. I discovered Mike's business was failing, with multiple loans in default. My parents had mortgaged their house to its limit, and their retirement accounts were nearly empty. Meanwhile, Jenna and Mike had taken out a second mortgage, supposedly for medical expenses. I found loan applications in my father's email citing expected medical insurance settlement as future income. They were counting on that $500,000 life insurance policy on me. That afternoon, I planted a recording device during a family meeting about final surgical preparations. I told them I needed to run an errand, then waited in my car down the street. When I retrieved the device later, what I heard confirmed my worst fears. Look, once Emma's under anesthesia, it's done, Mike's voice said clearly. She never needs to know the truth. But what if she finds out later? My mother asked. So what? If she does, Mike replied. After surgery, we'll say the cancer was misdiagnosed. Happens all the time. By then, I'll have her kidney, and the liability waiver protects us legally. I still don't understand why we had to make up the cancer story, my father grumbled. Because nobody donates a kidney for chronic kidney disease from painkiller abuse, Mike snapped. Cancer gets sympathy. Cancer gets donations. Cancer makes Emma feel like she has no choice. The next day was my final pre-op appointment. I met with a surgeon I hadn't seen before. A real transplant surgeon, it appeared. He reviewed my file, with growing confusion. Ms. Reynolds, I don't see any records of your oncology consultation or psychological evaluation, which are standard for living donors. Dr. Richards handled all that, I replied, watching his reaction. The surgeon frowned. Dr. Richards, I don't know any transplant specialist by that name. He excused himself to make a call. While he was gone, a nurse entered to take my vitals. As she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm, she leaned in close. You should ask about the cancer staging, she whispered. Something's not right with this case. When the surgeon returned, he seemed troubled. Ms. Reynolds, would you consent to additional tests? There seem to be some irregularities in your file. Actually, could I see Mike Thompson's medical records? I asked boldly. As his donor, don't I have the right to know his exact condition? The surgeon hesitated, then nodded slowly. I suppose that's reasonable. Let me see what I can do. An hour later, I was looking at Mike's actual medical file. He had stage 3 kidney disease from years of untreated high blood pressure and painkiller abuse following a construction accident. His condition was serious but manageable with dialysis. There was no cancer mentioned anywhere in his records, and he wasn't on any urgent transplant list. The weight of the deception crushed me. My entire family had conspired to harvest my kidney under false pretenses, risking my life for their financial gain. I felt hollow, numb with betrayal. That evening, the night before my scheduled surgery, I couldn't bear to be in the same house with them. I told my parents I needed some air and drove to the Rusty Nail, a bar on the edge of town where I wouldn't likely run into anyone who knew me. I sat in a dark corner, nursing a ginger ale, trying to figure out what to do next, and then I saw him. Mike was sitting at a booth across the room, surrounded by friends, including Dr. Richards. They were doing shots of whiskey and laughing. Mike, who was supposedly dying of cancer, who couldn't drink alcohol with his medications, who was scheduled for life-saving surgery in the morning, looked perfectly healthy and thoroughly intoxicated. Our eyes met across the dimly lit room. The smile died on his face, replaced by shock and then fear. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that everything had been a lie. and I knew exactly what I had to do. For a moment, the world around me seemed to freeze. The bar's dim lighting, the clinking glasses, the country music from the jukebox, all faded to background noise as Mike's eyes locked with mine. I saw panic flash across his face, followed by something more calculated as he leaned over to whisper to Dr. Richards. Both men glanced my way, their expressions darkening. I stood up, my legs shaking with anger and adrenaline, and walked directly to their table. "Hello, Mike. Feeling better?" My voice was surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. The table fell silent. Mike's friends, strangers to me, shifted uncomfortably. "Emma," Mike said, attempting a weak smile, "I was just having a small celebration. Last night of freedom before the big surgery tomorrow." I picked up his glass and sniffed it. "Whiskey? Interesting choice for someone dying of kidney cancer." "It's apple juice," he said, the lie so blatant it was almost comical with the nearly empty whiskey bottle sitting right on their table. Funny, I didn't realize apple juice came in Jack Daniel's bottles these days. Dr. Richards stood up abruptly. "Ms. Reynolds, perhaps we should discuss this privately." He gripped my elbow, attempting to steer me away from the table. I yanked my arm free. "Don't touch me. I know exactly who you are, Dr. Thompson. A dermatologist with a suspended license, not an oncologist. Fraud is a serious crime, isn't it?" The color drained from his face. Behind us, the other bar patrons had grown quiet, sensing the confrontation unfolding. "You're upset," Mike said, standing now too. "You've been under a lot of stress. Let me drive you home." "So my family can continue manipulating me? So you can all go through with stealing my kidney tomorrow under false pretenses?" "I don't think so." One of Mike's friends, a burly man with a red beard, stood up. "What is she talking about, Mike?" "Nothing, Dave." "She's confused." "Family drama? You know how it is." Mike forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to the strangers around us. "I'm not confused," I said, looking directly at Dave. "My brother-in-law and sister told me he's dying of kidney cancer. They've got the whole town convinced I'm a hero for donating my kidney. But there is no cancer. He has kidney disease from years of painkiller abuse. And they were planning to cash in on a life insurance policy they took out on me without my knowledge." The bar had gone completely silent now. Dr. Richards moved toward me again, his face contorted with anger. "You need to shut your mouth," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "I have every idea," I shot back. "I've seen Mike's real medical file. I've heard the recordings of you all planning this scam. I broke into your office. Nice letter you drafted explaining how the cancer was mysteriously misdiagnosed after you got my kidney." Mike lunged forward, grabbing my wrist so hard it hurt. "You're making a scene. We're leaving, now." That's when Dave stepped between us. "Let her go, Mike." "This isn't your business," Mike snarled. "You're hurting a woman in front of me. That makes it my business." Dave was several inches taller than Mike and used his size to advantage as he pried Mike's fingers from my wrist. I backed away, heart pounding. "I'm leaving, and I'm going straight to the police." "With what proof?" Dr. Richards sneered. "Your word against ours? The troublemaking daughter who abandoned her family for years? No one will believe you." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "I have recordings, photos of documents. Mike's actual medical records showing kidney disease, not cancer. The falsified donor match results in your handwriting. The draft letter planning to reveal the misdiagnosis after surgery. And now I have witnesses who heard Mike admit to drinking the night before a major surgery he supposedly desperately needs." The look of shock on their faces was almost worth everything I'd been through. I turned to leave, but Dr. Richards grabbed my purse, trying to snatch my phone. Dave and two other men from nearby tables immediately intervened, restraining him. "Someone call the cops," Dave shouted to the bartender. "This lady needs help." I ran to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I needed to get my belongings from my parents' house and find somewhere safe to stay until I could sort this out. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw Mike and Dr. Richards rushing to their car, presumably to beat me home. I took a back road to avoid them, fear and adrenaline making my heart pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I arrived, at my parents' house, the lights were on. I could see Jenna's car in the driveway along with my parents. They were waiting for me. Instead of going inside, I parked down the street and called the only person in Lakeside I thought I could trust. "Noah, it's Emma. I need help." 20 minutes later, I was explaining everything to Noah in his apartment above the town pharmacy. I told him about the fake cancer diagnosis, the insurance policy, the financial motivations, and my confrontation with Mike at the bar. "I need to get my things, but they're all at the house," I finished, exhausted. Noah ran his hand through his hair, his expression a mixture of shock and concern. "Emma, I don't even have words. I knew Mike had kidney problems, but this level of deception," he shook his head. "We need to call the police." "I will, but I need evidence first. My laptop and the files I collected are still there." "It's not safe for you to go back," Noah said firmly. "They've already shown they're willing to do whatever it takes. If they realize how much you know, there's no telling what they might do." As if to confirm his words, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "I work at First Michigan Bank. Your BIL tried to open credit lines with your SSN last year. We reported it, but nothing happened. Be careful." I showed Noah the message. "Great. Identity theft, too. The gift that keeps on giving." Noah's expression hardened. "You can't go back there, but I can help you get your things. My buddy Mark is a sheriff's deputy. He can come with us to keep the peace while you get your stuff." That night, I slept fitfully on Noah's couch, jumping at every sound. In the morning, I awoke to dozens of missed calls and increasingly threatening texts from my family. The final one, from my father, simply read, "You've ruined everything. Don't bother coming back." Mark arrived at 7 a.m. in his patrol car. Noah filled me in. He said grimly, "I've known your family for years, Emma, but if what you're saying is true, this is serious criminal activity." "It's true," I said quietly, "and I can prove it." The house was silent when we arrived. Mark knocked firmly on the door. "Sheriff's Department!" My mother opened it, her face a mask of surprised innocence that crumbled when she saw me standing there. "Emma, thank God, we've been so worried. Where have you been?" "Mrs. Reynolds," Mark interrupted. "Emma is here to collect her belongings. We'll need to come in." Of course," she stammered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Emma, darling, there's been a misunderstanding. Mike was just celebrating last night. A small indulgence before surgery." I brushed past her without responding and headed straight to my room. My suitcase had been emptied, my clothes scattered. Across the bed, my laptop was missing. "Where's my computer?" I demanded. "I don't know what you're talking about," my mother said, following me with Mark close behind. Noah appeared in the doorway. "Her rental car is missing too." My father emerged from his study, face flushed with anger. "You've gone too far, Emma. Bringing the police into a family matter? What kind of daughter does that?" "The kind whose family tried to steal her kidney and cash in on a life insurance policy," I replied coldly. "Where's my laptop?" "We don't have it," he insisted. Mark stepped forward. "Mr. Reynolds, tampering with someone else's property is a crime. If Emma's belongings have been taken, that's theft." A door slammed downstairs, followed by hurried footsteps. Jenna appeared, her face streaked with tears. "How could you do this? To us? To Mike? He needs that kidney." "He needs to stop abusing painkillers and alcohol," I shot back. "And you need to stop lying. Where's my laptop?" "Mike took it," she admitted, her voice suddenly small. "He said you had files that could cause trouble." "Jenna!" My mother gasped. I want my things back, or I'm pressing charges, I said firmly. For theft, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. My father stepped toward me, his finger pointed at my face. You ungrateful little— Mark put his hand on his holster. That's enough, Mr. Reynolds. Step back. The standoff was interrupted by the doorbell. Noah went to answer it and returned with Taylor, my assistant from Portland. Taylor? What are you doing here? I asked, shocked. You weren't answering your phone, and then I got this weird call from your sister saying you couldn't make it back to Portland because of a medical emergency, Taylor explained. I knew something was wrong. These people were planning to take my kidney based on a fake cancer diagnosis, I told her, watching my family's faces pale. They forged medical documents, falsified test results, took out a life insurance policy on me, and have apparently been using my identity for fraudulent loans. Taylor's eyes widened. That explains a lot. Emma, I've been looking into your family since you first called me with concerns. They've done this before. What? I turned to her in shock. Your parents were sued twice for insurance scams in the CR past. Jenna was investigated for Medicare fraud at her nursing job 3 years ago. The cases were dropped when witnesses suddenly changed their stories. Taylor pulled out her tablet and showed me news articles she'd found. My family stood in stunned silence. I want my laptop and my car keys, I said again. Now. Jenna's shoulders slumped in defeat. Mike has them at our house. I'll call him. An hour later, Mark, Noah, Taylor, and I were at Jenna and Mike's house. Mike handed over my laptop and car keys without meeting my eyes. Why? I asked simply. Why go to such extreme lengths? Mike slumped onto his couch. It started small. We just needed money for medical bills. Then your father suggested the life insurance policy, just in case something went wrong during surgery. It snowballed from there. You were going to take my kidney under false pretenses, I said, my voice shaking. You risked my life for money. You've always had it so easy, Jenna said bitterly. Perfect Emma with her perfect life in Portland. You've never struggled like we have. So that justifies this? I gestured around me. The lies, the manipulation, risking my health and life? No one answered. As we left, I turned back one last time. I'll be meeting with the district attorney tomorrow. You might want to get lawyers. The town of Lakeside exploded with gossip when the truth came out. The newspaper that had praised me as a local hero now ran a front-page retraction. Former supporters sent horrified messages, appalled they had been manipulated into pressuring me. Some apologized. Others questioned whether I was telling the truth, despite the mounting evidence. I stayed at Noah's apartment while deciding what to do next. Taylor returned to Portland to salvage what was left of our hotel contract, leaving me with a folder of evidence she'd compiled about my family's history of fraud and manipulation. What are you going to do? Noah asked one evening as we sat on his tiny balcony, watching the sunset over the lake. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to press charges, see them all face consequences. Another part just wants to go back to Portland and forget I ever had a family. They need help, Noah said quietly. Especially Mike. His kidney disease is real, even if the cancer wasn't. That thought had been weighing on me too. Despite everything, I couldn't just ignore the fact that Mike's health was genuinely deteriorating. The next day, I insisted he see a legitimate nephrologist in the neighboring city. Dr. Wilson confirmed what we already knew. Stage 3 kidney disease that could have been managed with lifestyle changes years ago if Mike had followed medical advice. His continued drinking had accelerated the damage. Am I going to die? Mike asked, his voice small. Not if you make serious changes, Dr. Wilson said firmly. Dialysis can manage your symptoms while we evaluate you for the transplant list, but you need to be completely sober for at least 6 months first. I met with a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases. She laid out my options: press criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy, or handle it privately with legally binding agreements. The evidence is strong, she explained. Especially with the recording of them discussing the insurance money. But trials are public, messy, and can drag on for years. Meanwhile, the police were investigating Dr. Richards for practicing outside his specialty and falsifying medical documents. His minor involvement in the scheme seemed to be motivated by money. Mike had apparently promised him a cut of the insurance payout. A week after everything came to light, Jenna asked to meet me alone at a neutral location, a coffee shop on the edge of town. She looked terrible, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice hoarse. "I know you have no reason to talk to me." "Why am I here, Jenna?" I asked, too, exhausted for small talk. "I need to explain," she said, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Not to excuse what we did. There's no excuse. But so you understand how it happened." She told me how the plan had started small, just asking me for financial help with Mike's medical bills. But when she realized I might actually agree to be tested as a donor, the idea expanded. Mike's business was failing. My parents had bailed them out repeatedly and depleted their retirement savings. The life insurance policy was my father's idea. Just in case something went wrong during surgery, but the potential payout became too tempting. "We convinced ourselves you owed us," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "You've been so successful, so independent. I've been jealous of you my entire life, Emma. You escaped this town, made something of yourself, while I've been trapped here, watching my husband slowly kill himself with alcohol despite his kidney disease." "That doesn't justify what you did," I said quietly. "I know," she whispered. "I wanted to take something from you that you couldn't get back. I wanted you to know what it feels like to have your choices taken away." She pushed a small velvet box across the table. "This was Grandma's wedding ring. Mom gave it to me even though Grandma wanted you to have it. I'm giving it back." I left the ring on the table when I walked out. My parents tried a different approach. When I refused to see them, they began telling extended family members that they were suffering from early-stage dementia, which had affected their judgment. Concerned relatives called me, asking why I wasn't supporting my parents through their health crisis. I insisted on medical evaluations, which confirmed what I already knew. Another lie. They were simply unwilling to take responsibility for their actions. The social media war began shortly after. Jenna posted a tearful video claiming I had misunderstood their innocent request for help and that the whole situation had been blown out of proportion. Former high school classmates took sides. Someone spray-painted "family killer" on my rental car while I was finalizing legal matters. Just when I felt most alone, I received an unexpected email from an uncle I barely remembered, my father's brother, Robert, who had left Lakeside decades ago and had been estranged from the family ever since. "Emma," he wrote, "I've heard rumors about what happened with Mike and your kidney. Please call me. You're not the first person they've tried this with." When we spoke on the phone, Uncle Robert revealed he'd cut contact with the family after my father and grandfather had attempted a similar scheme involving insurance fraud when Robert was in his 20s. "Your father has always seen family members as resources to be used," he said sadly. "I'm sorry you had to learn that the hard way." After weeks of emotional turmoil, legal consultations, and therapy sessions, I made my decision. I would press charges for identity theft and fraud but offer a deal. If they agreed to complete psychological evaluation, financial restitution, and accept no contact orders, I would recommend leniency. "Are you sure?" Noah asked when I told him my decision. "No one would blame you for walking away completely." "I'm sure," I said. "They need to face consequences, but I don't want to destroy their lives. I just want them out of mine." 6 months later, I returned to Lakeside for the sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed with curious townspeople. My family sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Mike received 2 years of probation and mandatory addiction treatment. Jenna lost her nursing license. My parents avoided jail time due to their age, but were sentenced to significant community service hours and placed under financial guardianship. The judge also granted permanent restraining orders, legally requiring them to stay away from me. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't closure. That would take more time. But it was a step forward. Back. In Portland, I threw myself into rebuilding my design business, which had suffered during the ordeal. Taylor had kept things running as best she could, but we'd lost the hotel contract and several other clients. Emma Reynolds? A woman in an impeccable suit approached me in my studio one afternoon. "I'm Caroline Westfield, CEO of Pacific Northwest Resorts." I recognized the name immediately, one of the largest hospitality groups in the region. "I heard about what happened with your family," she said directly. "It was in several industry newsletters. Designer abandons major project for family emergency, later revealed to be elaborate fraud scheme." I winced. Not my finest professional moment. "On the contrary," Caroline said, surprising me. "The way you handled it, the fact that you made an ethical stand when it would have been easier to give in, that's exactly the kind of character I want working on our new flagship property in Seattle." The contract she offered was larger than any project I'd ever handled. When I asked why she would take a chance on me after my professional stumble, she smiled. "In this business, I can teach someone design trends or project management. I can't teach integrity. You've demonstrated that, in spades." Meanwhile, I had decided to sell my childhood home in Lakeside, which had been left to me in my grandmother's will, something my parents had hidden from me for years. The buyers were a young couple with adopted children who promised to fill it with the love and honesty it had never had when I lived there. Noah and I continued to talk regularly after I returned to Portland. What began as check-ins about the legal proceedings evolved into late-night conversations about everything and nothing. The teenage connection we'd shared deepened into something more mature and genuine. 6 months after the trial, he surprised me by announcing he'd accepted a pharmaceutical sales position in Portland. "I've always wanted to try living in a real city," he said over the phone, though we both knew that wasn't the only reason. The experience had changed me profoundly. I established a foundation providing financial and emotional support to legitimate organ donors and recipients, focusing on education about ethical transplantation and donor rights. The Reynolds Rights Initiative quickly gained support from medical professionals concerned about transplant ethics. About a year after everything had happened, I received another letter from Jenna. Unlike her previous attempts at communication, alternating between blame and pleas for forgiveness, this one was different. 12 handwritten pages from her therapy program, taking full responsibility without excuses. She enclosed nothing but her words, asking for nothing in return. I read it twice, then filed it away. I wasn't ready to respond, but I didn't throw it away either. Maybe someday. My parents made one final attempt at manipulation, faking a heart attack to lure me back to Michigan. When I sent Noah to check instead, they were caught preparing a reconciliation party with local media invited to document our heartwarming reunion. The restraining order was extended for another 5 years. Life took an unexpected turn when routine blood work for a new life insurance policy, one I had chosen myself, revealed I had a genetic kidney condition, one that would have made donation dangerous or even fatal. The doctor was shocked anyone had considered me as a donor without discovering this. "Ms. Reynolds, based on these results, a kidney donation could have caused severe complications or even death, especially with the substandard aftercare plan your family had arranged," Dr. Morgan explained. "It's actually fortunate you discovered their deception when you did." The final twist of fate came when I discovered I was pregnant, something the fraudulent medical testing had missed entirely. Noah was overjoyed, his support unwavering as we navigated this unexpected chapter together. "Are you scared?" he asked one night as we looked at ultrasound pictures. About creating a family after everything that happened with yours? Every day, I admitted. But then I remember. Family isn't just who you're related to. It's who loves you honestly, who supports you without conditions. I squeezed his hand. That's what I want to build. That's what this child deserves. 1 year after the sentencing, I returned to Lakeside one last time to visit my grandmother's grave. I needed to say goodbye properly. To her, to my past, to the weight I'd been carrying. As I placed flowers on her headstone, I noticed someone standing several rows away. Mike. Thinner, sober-looking, more subdued than I remembered. He didn't approach, just nodded respectfully from a distance. I nodded back. Later, as I was leaving, I found a note tucked under my windshield. Wiper. I'm 1 year sober, it read in Mike's handwriting. Dialysis 3 times a week. Jenna is in weekly therapy. We're not asking for forgiveness, just wanted you to know your stand made a difference. We're trying to be better people. I didn't contact them. The wounds were still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. But as I drove away from Lakeside for what I decided would be the last time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness, but a sense of peace. They had tried to take something precious from me under false pretenses, but in the process, I'd found something even more valuable. The truth about family, about boundaries, about my own strength. My real life, the one I was building on my own terms, was waiting for me in Portland. The family I was creating would be built on honesty, not manipulation. On love, not exploitation. And that was something worth protecting at all costs. Would you sacrifice everything for a family that sees you as nothing but a means to an end? Where do you draw the line between loyalty and self-preservation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed Emma's journey, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, courage, and redemption.